this any better. Alright, let's see. Guess I need that. Okay. This is my latest report. It's a big mess. I have no idea what I'm doing. I know how many times I have to do it, but to get through it. I can't stand the way I look, but I guess I gotta deal with that. I don't know what to do about that. Okay. You know what? Previously, what I've been doing is basically trying to touch on the discrepancy between what Fox News says. You know, compile a whole lot of stuff together that I read different places like USA Today and, you know, Fox News reports I find here and there, and try to put everything together and give out the discrepancy between what Fox News doesn't tell you, what they tell you, and what I think is important. And first of all, Susan Collins' speech. We had, you know, the Sunday night show with Steve Hilton, you know, the populist. He's supposed to talk about corruption. And I think he fell short when he talked about Susan Collins' speech. I mean, it's a little bit dated. It's a while back. I was going to do this report a long time ago. Kept putting it off. I don't know. I guess I couldn't find anything I thought of any real value, you know, but before now that Fox News didn't bring out. But there's probably quite a bit, you know, that people ought to be concerned about that they don't talk about. And one thing, Susan Collins' speech, I mean, basically what she said about Kavanaugh. First, I think Kavanaugh was a big mistake. I voted for Trump. I support Trump. He's a pretty good swamp drainer. He's done quite a bit. He did a little bit to drain the swamp. And he knows what he's doing. He knows how, you know, where none of the other presidents ever did anything. He's the first president, you know, a whole lot of other presidents or candidates tried to get in and drain the swamp. As soon as the corporates found out about it, they knocked him off. They you know, gave him a bunch of money to the Federal Election Commission, you know, with Ross Perot, put the 50% rule in so he couldn't be in the debate, knocked him off. One way or another, Sanders, they did the same thing. You know, the 1%ers, they're giving them money, apparently, the DNC, to keep Sanders out. Well, Trump got in, and he's done a little bit, so I support him. I voted for him. But there's some mistakes he's making. And one of them is that both Supreme Court people, Bernie Sanders brought this out too, none of them support campaign finance reform. And you've got to have that to drain the swamp. That's the most important thing. And Susan Collins' speech, he said he was a moderate. He was he studied the Constitution. He has good credentials. He knows the Constitution. He's going to protect Roe versus Wade. He leaves out political biases, interprets Constitution in a vacuum. Okay, but and she had a real good report. I mean, what she said, but she left out some very important points. You know, with Kavanaugh. You know, he shouldn't have been in there. He's somebody who shouldn't have been approved. He's another one. You know, he's just as bad as Roberts and Alito. He shouldn't have been in there. And what Collins failed to mention, Susan Collins, and Steve Hilton was in there talking about what a good speech it was and what it had to do with democracy, the basic principles of democracy, and why America is so great. Which surprised me because Steve Hilton, if he understands corruption, he's way off. Okay, here's the problem with Kavanaugh. What about the fact that he supports dark money contributions coming in to Congress from campaign finance corruption? You know, from corporate donors, the corporates. He supports dark money coming in, which is strings attached, gives them power over Congress to make legislation. They get in there, they want something, they need the campaign money to get reelected, they have to have it, so they do whatever the corporates want. That's where the trouble is, why Congress is seized up. That's why they don't get anything passed. Everything moves towards the periphery. It's a big sucking sound towards the periphery. Well, the voters left out of the equation. And so everybody's on the periphery, so neither one meet in the middle. Where if the voter was involved, you know, the voter's centrist, they'd suck everything to the middle and they'd have a compromise. But the system is broken, you know, and that's why. If he supports dark money, he shouldn't be in there. And, yeah, Bernie Sanders brought this out. The appointee who supports corruption in government Susan Collins studied the basic principles of government that we learned in government class in high school. I mean, for example, government has to be, man is gregarious. Government has to be illegitimate. It has to meet the needs of the people. Man likes to live in groups. That's why you have government. It's order out of chaos. Well, I mean, that's what we got here is chaos. The Declaration of Independence talks about why we broke away from England. Of course, a lot of it, why we broke away from England, is rebels. Thomas Paine's common sense. That was one thing. Why should we take orders from some country halfway around the world, clear across the ocean? What right do they have? You had John Hancock who signed his name. So basically, you had a bunch of rebels, you had a bunch of motorcycle types, hate authority. Essentially what it was, but you also had to have more than rebels to break away, essentially throw off a government. And the reason it was thrown off, if you read the Declaration of Independence, it has to do with fires and floods. They couldn't get on the phone with England when they had a big fire or a flood somewhere, so it wasn't meeting the needs of the people. What I'm trying to say now is, like Joe Walsh said, the system's broken, we've all got our head in the sand. Well, it's like, why is it you can listen to Joe Walsh? He's in the Eagles. He played the end of Hotel California. I don't know if he composed it, but the double neck guitar, the song Hotel California by the Eagles. I can listen to him for half a second and get more information on what's wrong with the government than I do when I listen to Hannity for a whole hour. Hannity doesn't bring that out once. Yeah, he never talks about the system being broken. He just complains for an hour and never really gets on it, but like I say, it's the everything moves towards the periphery and the system doesn't work. Anyway, Kavanaugh, let's see, I already said that. Supports dark money coming into Congress, I already said that. Campaign finance corruption. She's neglected to point out, the government's failing to meet the needs of the people. There's a lot of evidence of that. I mean, look at the last 8 years. It wasn't Obama, it was the damnable W got in there. Basically, and the banks had all the teaser rates and everything. The idea being, we'll put a teaser rate on there. If people get a loan for a house, we'll yank it way up, we'll go in there, get their house, blew up in their face. They went in there, got their house, tried to sell it, nobody to buy it. Big surprise. And the country tanked. The damnable W, mainly, Bush. Got in there, incompetent president, and then Obama tried to fix it and wasn't real good at that, but he didn't do enough. But so basically, you had 10 cities in Nevada. Right now, we got a bunch of 10 cities in California. We got people working 3 jobs to make it. We got people living in their cars in California, like Sanders pointed out. Trump hasn't fixed everything. The government's not meeting the needs of the people. And there's 2 reasons why the government isn't meeting the needs of the people. Let's see, the Constitution guarantees popular sovereignty. The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal, which implies you have one man, one vote. You put those 2 together. Corporations are people, but all people are created equal. You don't give corporations 500 votes and give, the man half a vote or a third of a vote, whatever. Spirit of the Constitution versus the letter of it. If someone has a whole lot of money and someone else has, that has to do with the violation of the First Amendment. That's the other argument they make. This is what Susan Collins didn't bring out. They always make the argument that limits on campaign spending is an infringement on the First Amendment, an abridgment of the First Amendment, I think is the way they put it. Well, the spirit of the Constitution, if someone has a whole lot of money and someone else doesn't, right? And you watch all the campaign ads, native campaigning. Somebody didn't, like David Bratt, didn't advertise at all. But didn't run the native campaign. Somebody else is running them. You have a relative voice thing going on. The one without any campaign money has a low volume. People don't hear him. The one with all the campaign money wins. Well, that would be the case if you ruled for Citizens United. You're against campaign finance corruption and McCain-Feingold law. If you supported corruption and were against the campaign finance law, you'd have an abridgment of the First Amendment by the relative voice thing. Well, apparently Kavanaugh doesn't understand that. And you could also argue that, it was a violation of the First Amendment to not have free airtime for people that don't have money. Chief Roberts and Alito don't argue that way. Well, if they argue one way, they have to argue that way. So really, like Al Gore said, money is not the First Amendment. And the Constitution guarantees popular sovereignty, and you don't have popular sovereignty if you have campaign finance corruption. So that apparently they didn't. It was liberal expanded interpretation of the Constitution. They're worried about their letter of the First Amendment and not the spirit of it. That's where they screwed up. And that's why if Kavanaugh supports dark money, he's worried about the letter of it, not the spirit of it. He shouldn't have been in there. Apparently, so Susan Collins neglected. She didn't read the Declaration of Independence. She didn't read the Constitution. She didn't understand the basic principles of capitalism. Here's what I wrote on here. If you don't have one man, one vote, you don't have popular sovereignty. If you don't have popular sovereignty, you don't have democracy. If you don't have democracy, you don't have capitalism. You don't have real capitalism. If you don't have real capitalism, you don't have the American dream, and government doesn't meet the needs of the people. Leads to a government overthrow eventually. If it gets worse and worse, which it probably will, as soon as Trump's real smart, he's a businessman, he's doing pretty good. As soon as he made $1 billion, but the next president isn't going to be a businessman like Trump, and we'll be right back where we were. The swamp will be right back to doing everything it's doing. He hasn't drained the swamp, he's only agitated the water moccasins, and they're biting him. But he hasn't drained the swamp. So therefore, Susan Collins failed to point out Kavanaugh was the wrong man. Okay, the Mitch McConnell issue. Mitch McConnell is the kingpin of campaign finance. He needs to be out the door. Ashley Judd tried to knock him off. And she got in there, and of course, being the kingpin of campaign finance corruption, he ran this vicious negative attack against her, said she was mentally ill, and then she dropped out. Well, Ashley Judd's a Democrat, but anybody needs, whether Democrat or not, they need to get in there and knock off McConnell. And Pelosi's just as bad. Both of them need to be out the door if you want the government that works. He's the kingpin, he's the Al Capone, he's the mob guy, the ground zero for all the trouble we have in the government. Why it doesn't work. Well, Figueroa brought out a while back that on a Sunday morning on Meet the Press that McConnell kept arguing, well, you haven't had a Supreme Court appointee get in at the end of someone's term, presidential term, since 18. Actually, they brought out, the guy on Meet the Press brought out, we had one back in the 90s who was put in, and the opposing party, let's see, Mr. Collins says something to the effect, we haven't, okay, got that. CBS Face the Nation pointed out that we had one in the 90s which the opposition party had helped clear the way for an appointment, which means McConnell was lying. Well, here's the whole thing. McConnell was lying. I think he was. Because he knew, look, you had 4 people in there, the Supreme Court, that supported campaign finance reform. They're all put in by liberals. He didn't want one more liberal that's going to knock his corruption. He's the kingpin. And he knew that if Obama got that one in there, it was going to knock off campaign finance corruption. So he made sure that Obama didn't get it, and he made sure Kavanaugh got through, because that's one more that's going to support McConnell and his corruption, and that's why he was jumping up and down, and why he was so aggressive at getting that guy through there, and that's why he was laughing and having a gay old time when he got him through. But and when he said that about, we haven't had one since 1800, I think it was just a lie. The other thing, okay, the midterms, how they turned out. Okay, the worst problem with the midterms. Basically, the Democrats are in bed with the swamp. In other words, right now, there's 3 Democrats I feel that are not in bed with the swamp. That would be Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, and Lieberman. And there may be a lot of others. But Pelosi's right in bed with it. She's right in bed with campaign money. She said she had this thing locked up. She had all the campaign money. In other words, she's got so many corporations backing her that she can get in, and run that Congress. She can get in there because she has all the corporations backing her. And you know what that means, corruption. She's right in bed with them. And no one else will vote against her because they need campaigning from the corporates too. So she's right, this swamp kingpin, that's what she is. She's another one. And okay, Time Warner, CNN, Comcast, MSNBC, Disney, ABC, they're all swampers. They don't tell you the positives in keeping the borders open. And the positives of keeping the borders closed. How many times have you ever heard, let's see, Oh, did you notice back when Clinton and Perot ran for president, did you notice that it wasn't taboo to talk about closing the borders? Even the Democrats wanted the borders closed. Clinton wanted them closed. Ross Perot wanted them closed. Obama wanted them closed. You ever notice that? It wasn't a taboo issue. Now all of a sudden it's a big taboo thing. And notice that, that Jim Acosta, because he's working for Time Warner. Here's the thing. Time Warner profits. And how many times have you heard on CNN that Time Warner stands to profit from closed borders? ABC, Disney stands to profit or from open borders. How many times have they told you that if they close those borders, your wages go up? Because they want to pad their wallet and rip you off. That's what it is. They stand to profit from having those borders open. And that's why, that's why you don't hear anything about it. That's why it's a taboo subject all of a sudden, because they run the media. ABC News, they're the three major networks. NBC, ABC, I don't know about Viacom, CBS, I don't know. I know the other two, they've had the whole populace brainwashed into thinking that there's something wrong with closing the borders. That's why they do it, because they want to screw you and get your wallet. When you've got a right to close borders and higher wages. Like I say, government's supposed to meet the needs of the people. You got chaos here. That's why you have to have a legitimate government. You have to have a government meet the needs of the people. Like I say, you have one man, one vote to have democracy where the system works right. The point where it doesn't meet the needs of the people anymore is so chaotic that the people, that the Spanish race that's here can't feed their families because the wages are so low. And the same with the black race, same with people like me and a lot of other people. Okay. But the biggest problem, I think, with the midterms is that right now, but the thing to remember is when they want those borders open, that's really the corporates talking. That's them and their wallet. Because they're the ones that are, they had one just recently, I heard of a Democrat saying, I don't have time to impeach Kavanaugh. I've got 1 billion people telling me, well, I don't know how they stated, a whole bunch of people telling me that I got to impeach Trump in the next term. Well, who are these people? Probably the people with the campaign money. So when you're listening to the Democrats, it's not the Democrats doing it, it's those people that are backing them with campaign money. It's the corruption, the corporates. That's who want those borders open. And when they keep them open, they're not, and Trump is on your side. He may not appear to be, but that's what CNN wants to convince you, that he's the enemy, because he's hurting, like I say, his corruption. Okay. Remember, open borders, right? Okay, I said that. 1% of the wallet will get fat. Yeah, the 1%ers, Steyers, Bloomberg, Koch brothers, Soros, whoever else, will get fat. Their wallets, and the Time Warner, the CEO, and the rest of them are, at least I don't know about Time Warner for sure. I do know though that Sanders brought out the Disney Corporation hires cheap labor. I'm not sure what Time Warner does. I don't know. I assume they do. They seem to be involved in a pact, but they appear to be. But they don't bring out that a Mexican came over the border, raped somebody, went back. You don't hear it on any of the major networks because the corporates want those borders open. All right. Now, let's see. I've heard reports on Disney Corporation. I haven't heard on any on, but I'm sure if Sanders knew about it, he'd report it probably. Okay, so it's a power struggle. It's a fight over the government. It's the 1%, the 99%. That's what it is. And when Nancy Pelosi, it's not a Democrat-Republican battle. It's between Trump, and it's not a partisan between Trump, Democrat, Republican. It's a wallet battle. It's a power struggle. It's like apartheid in South Africa. It's the 1% fighting the 99%. And if Nancy Pelosi gets in there and says she wants those borders open, remember, she's just a puppet of those people with campaign money. Okay, now firing Sessions. That's the next one. Department of Justice, we all know what justice means, right? Does anybody know, the Department of Justice, isn't that what he was? I don't know, Attorney General. I think that's what Department of Justice, I'm not positive. I don't know, my government, some of my knowledge of all the offices and the cabinet and whatever, not real good sometimes, but I I'm more into ideology. But anyway, the Department of Justice, we all know justice means fairness. Well, okay, we got a swamp, right? Okay, everybody knows there's a swamp. You know, and Trump talked about draining the swamp. So we know that Sessions, his job, if he's the Department of Justice, if you have a swamp, you probably don't have justice. That's my understanding. And so, from past experience, anyone, like I say, several people tried to get in the government. They got knocked off by the swampers. Perot got knocked off. You know, the 50% rule couldn't be in the debate. He didn't have 50% support. You know, like I say, the only reason that's there to keep Perot out and protect their campaign finance corruption. Keep their stronghold over the government. They knocked off Bernie Sanders. They knocked off Ralph Nader. They knocked off Jerry Brown. Trump's the first one to get in. Okay, so you know there's a swamp, and you know the swamp's probably going to fight back. You know, the water moccasins probably going to bite Trump. Well, that's what's happening. The water moccasins are fighting back. Okay, so Sessions' job is to get to the bottom of it, right? If he's the Department of Justice, anything that has the appearance of the swamp fighting back, like the Mueller investigation. Okay, as the Sessions freed every man, woman, and child in the United States of any suspicion that Mueller investigation is not the swamp fighting back. My answer to that is no. Then he needs to be fired. He needs to be out the door. If he hasn't got to the bottom of that so that we know as a fact that the Mueller investigation was not the swamp fighting back, he needs to be fired. That's the only reason Trump needed to get rid of him. He never should have been put in the first place. He should have been fired 5 minutes after, as soon as he recused himself. He should have been out the door for that reason, no other reason. Yeah, I mean, that darn Napolitano's on there arguing, well, Trump could have obstructed justice. What about the obstruction of justice when we don't know whether the swamp fighting back is, you know, the Mueller investigation is a result of swamp fighting back? That's not obstruction of justice. I mean, Napolitano, get a brain. Napolitano is dumber than dog shit. He sure was on that. Okay, the Department of Justice is not really Justin Sessions. He'd be out the door a long time ago. Let's see, how's the public now? Okay, official DNC the right to bug Trump Tower. Okay, there's a whole lot of things. Who gave the DNC the right to bug Trump Tower? Was it financed by a 1% billionaire? According to Fox News, Mueller received large sums of money from the corporates. They didn't say what it was for, but there was a report on Fox News on Hannity that Mueller received large sums of money from the corporates. There was a report that Comey received large sums of money from the corporates. On Judge Jeanine, they had someone on there from the Justice Department that said Soros had given sums of money to the DNC to keep, when Trump ordered an investigation of the election tampering. Trying to find out, Debbie, what's her name, that does the same progressive, had a whole bunch of reports about election tampering, election fraud, that people purge from the rolls. You come in there to vote, they find out you're a Sanders supporter, so they say you're too tall, your name's spelled wrong, you didn't sign it right. Your wrong address. 101 ways to throw out a Sanders supporter. They wrote the book on it. You come in there, they wouldn't let you vote. Well, anyway, they investigated. Trump ordered investigation. Well, someone on Judge Jeanine that worked for the Justice Department said that George Soros had given sums of money, and this is what I heard on Judge Jeanine. I'm not saying that's true. All I'm saying, I'm relaying it. That's what I heard. Someone in the Justice Department said that Soros had given the DNC a whole lot of money to send out a redacted report where they just say, top secret, we can't tell you. Redacted, because it's covered up. Well, how do we know that one of these billionaires hasn't given money to the DNC that caused the election tampering in the first place? And that there probably was election tampering. There were 2 reports on the ABC, one of the major networks, that the Rhode Island had closed some of the polling places where Sanders supporters were, and then in Sanders' district they had closed a bunch of them where Sanders lived when he was in New York. So New York and Rhode Island both had, and that was major news. So I suspect that Debbie's probably right. Every last thing she said, if she was right about it, about election tampering, it sure wouldn't surprise me. Well, anyway, we know that. So I mean, there's evidence. There's enough evidence that it was the swamp fighting back, and Sessions didn't get to the bottom of it. He needs to be out the door. If he didn't answer any of the questions I just brought up, he needs to be out the door. Okay. Okay, now the Jim Acosta thing. Trump's statement of Jim Acosta and Time Warner. Oh, here's that big fight they had, a while back, 2 or 3 days, whenever it was. They were fighting over the mic. The girl's going to grab the mic from him and tried to, they were fighting over the mic. But whether Trump had the right to throw him out, I don't know. But, Jim Acosta reminds me of people I used to work with at Denny's. We had this one guy from Tulsa. It's like their parents have money, and they just think they own the town, and they think they own the whole restaurant, because their parents are prominent, big lawyer in town, whatever. They're in the government, and they come in there, and they're just arrogant, as, the yuppie type is real arrogant, throws their power around. It's self-appointed GM of the universe, and it's gone to their head, their prominence of their parents, and that's what he makes me think of. And I don't know about most other people, I just can't stand him, and I don't blame Trump. But anyway, Trump made a statement, the media is the enemy of the people. True or false? Well, I say true. Look, the power struggle with the campaign finance system and the fight over the government, 1% versus 19%, it was brought out by a congressman and a lobbyist that wanted to buy out the media. In other words, the lobbyist went into Congress and told the congressman he wanted to buy out the media, shut up independent voices, protect campaign finance corruption. And the congressmen, they know, they're the ones that deal with the lobbyists. So, and if anybody's going to know, it's going to be the congressman. He went to the media with it. And so, the media, so we know that Time Warner probably bought out Comcast for that reason. To shut up independent voices and keep their power. And the media is like a queen when you're playing chess. He who owns the media runs the country. They have a lot of power, and if they want to keep their power over the Congress, the way to do that is get control of the media. That's what they're doing. And so, so Trump's right. They're the enemy of the people. And if he's working, if Jim Acosta works for that company, and they want to control, and they bought out, they bought out CNN for that reason, and it appears that way, their corporate interests, then they are the enemy of the people. So what Trump, well, you don't hear anything positive about closing the borders. You don't hear anything on CNN, you notice that. So the illegal aliens raping women going back to Mexico, you never hear anything about that. You never hear anything to keep wages down. That if you close the borders, wages go up. How many times has CNN brought that out? Never. How about the people, the drugs that go into south side of Chicago? They don't bring that out. That's what they don't tell you. Well, so they're the enemy of the people. So when Trump said they're the enemy, CNN's the enemy of the people, apparently he's right, because it's a half-truth. And what Trump should have told Acosta, basically Acosta, you reek of fraud. There's a skunk in the woodpile. How does it make you look when you know the Disney Corporation profits from open borders, and you're working for a large corporation, and you're not bringing out that open borders keep wages down to the detriment of the Spanish race that's working here legally? Why didn't Acosta bring that out? How does it make him look as a reporter? If he's not, it's a half-truth. You're keeping the corporate wallet fat, and it has appearance of an axe to grind, a conflict of interest, ulterior motive, or a hidden agenda. And you're telling a half-truth when you support the caravan. To me, that's what Trump should have told him. All those things. In other words, he's a fraud. I feel like he is. Okay, now the Commerce Clause. Levine was talking on Fox a while back. He said, well, should the Commerce Clause be constitutional? It seems like something that shouldn't be in there. And he was talking about, how the right to regulate interstate commerce, the right of Congress to regulate interstate commerce. And he said, he's asking how constitutional the Commerce Clause was in the Constitution or the judicial history of it, like a constitutional law course. And Levine, really, it's the same thing. It has to do with like your Citizens United case, where they're more worried about the letter of the Constitution than the spirit of it, and they end up really violating the public as a result. The Commerce Clause was there because of the territory that was not a state, the Indian tribes, and the dealings the Indian tribes had, or the commerce that the Indian tribes had with the states. The fact that there were still territory, they weren't all states, and there's no one else to regulate the territory other than Congress. It had nothing to do with hard-soled shoes at Mistletoe Shipping Company. In other words, as a federal law, you have to wear hard-soled shoes if you work for Mistletoe Shipping. What does that have to do with territory and the Indian tribes? In other words, it was some liberal, his liberal expanded interpretation. He wanted something, so he just said, well, Congress has the right to regulate interstate commerce, and therefore, if you're very close to the state line and you buy a drink, that Congress has the right to regulate who you let into your bar. You know, it had nothing to do with that anymore than the man in the moon. So Levine's suspicions were right. You know, the right to regulate interstate commerce should have nothing to do with who drinks in a bar, has nothing to do with who wears hard-soled shoes. You know, the way that the Supreme Court should handle that. You take, for example, you got a big port, you know, in Seattle. And in Seattle, say Seattle has a company they want to run under in Montana. So they're not going to let the shipping company come in to this corporation. So they block the ports. That's a big fight between Montana and Washington State. The way I've understood that always worked before is that Congress, that the Supreme Court took it on a case-by-case basis. It goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court deals with it. The Supreme Court should have dealt with everything that had to do with interstate commerce and shouldn't have thrown it over to Congress. There's no reason in the Constitution anywhere they should have done it that way. There's no reason, you know, in the public interest that they shouldn't have done it that way. And like I say, it's the letter of the Constitution versus the spirit of the Constitution. It's a fight between Washington. I did that already. Anyway, that's the little I know that Levine was wanting to know about, and but I think he was right. Levine knows what he's talking about most of the time. I always agree with him, pretty much 100%. But I'm pretty sure he's right about that. It had to do with the Indian tribes. It had anything to do with any other kind of regulation other than the fact that the Indian tribes were dealing with the states and there was just territory, there was no state. And anyway, in the part of the country that was just a territory, and they didn't have a state hadn't been established at that point. Well, anyway, I guess that's all I got to say right now, and thanks for watching.